chair of the department, and I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today. But one short note is that AGSA has come up with a good idea of putting up talks for those speakers who consent on YouTube. So they created a YouTube channel, and Renee and her co-presenters are excited to have their presentation put up on YouTube, and I think this is a really neat step. Anyway, so the title of today's presentation is here on the board. I'll read it. Digital Pedagogies, the Fun and Pitfalls of Group Projects in Large Lecture Classes. And I'll let the speakers explain the second subtitle there, the self stuff. And so it's going to be Dr. Renee Bonzani, accompanied by Stephen Fox, Gary Chandler, and Aklilu Reda. So, welcome. Go ahead. Let's go.
Hi, everybody. I get to go first in the presentation, and then Stephen will follow me, and then Gary, and then Aklilu. And this is this is talking about an assignment that was developed through the Center for the Enhancement of Learning and Teaching, CELT, and in their Teaching Innovation Institute. So a lot of different inputs from Jill who's here, and Izzy later. Really helpful with the assignment. Well, part of what we have to do is pick a class that we normally teach, and I often teach some of the large lecture classes, including A&T 160, that now is called Global Cultural Diversity Today. And this is an important class for the university. It meets the UK core global dynamics requirements. And generally, it's completely for non-majors. So I don't think maybe any of the students or anthropology majors, and probably none of them have had anthropology classes. So the idea is to try to introduce the students to the diversity of cultural experiences in the world today. Now, for me, this was even a large class because it had 9 sections and 265 students. So it's very large. I'm used to 3 sections, 90 students, or 6 sections with 180 students, but this was pretty large. So there were some adjustments we had to make as we went along, I think, in the semester because of the large size. Now the class had been renamed, and the learning objectives had been changed about 2 years ago to try to make the class more inclusive and cover different kinds of perspectives and information in anthropology, and moving away from the colonial era views of people and things like that. So these were some of these are the new learning outcomes that a number of faculty worked on. I think it was about 2 years ago. So for this assignment, I thought, okay, well, I wanted to do something that would help the students learn more about different types of identities and personhoods and things like that. So we focused on number 3, how categories of identity, age, ethnicity, gender, and race, for example, are always and continually constructed in social life and not fixed in human biology. And then number 5 fit in with that also, how to recognize and learn to counter ethnocentrism, racism, stereotyping, and other forms of discrimination, silencing, marginalization, and violence stemming from devaluing rather than valuing these diverse cultural identities locally and globally, and then individually and structurally. So I thought, okay, why don't you try to do an assignment that would have the students themselves think of different kinds, or at least be introduced to different kinds of identities activities both at a local level and then maybe they could look at that a little bit globally. Now, again, this is a 100-level class, so it was just a general idea of trying to do that. Now, with SELF, the goals also were to try to make more of the assignments multimodal, so not necessarily just a written assignment, which was good. Jill was saying the other day, don't eliminate the writing assignments, but include some of the other different ways that students can interact with the material and present material, and also using digital pedagogies. So what are multimodal assignments? That's an assignment that invites students to engage in more than one medium of communication. So video, there's some examples coming up of that. It gives students the opportunity to select from several different media. Now again, this class being so large, they recommended against giving students a choice of different kinds of things to do, because you have to give them the instructions to do how to do all those things. So we just focused on one, which was in this case, we'll show you the infographics. And then the digital pedagogies, use of digital technologies to enhance learning and inclusivity of all students. We're trying to get students involved when, for instance, if they were sick or couldn't come to class, how might they still be able to participate? So after going to numerous workshops, one in particular designing multimodal assignments, I like this slide, and it sort of gives you a walkthrough of how to begin to do this. So you start with your learning objectives, and then determine what it is you want your students to be able to do. And Stephen's going to talk more about that for this assignment. It's in relation to gender, this broad topic of gender. Choose a multi-modality or product based on goals, and so we picked the infographics. It's a digital app and easy to access on Canva, and then design a clear prompt and rubrics. And so we went through something, we had those are the instructions to tell the students how to do the assignment. And then the grading rubrics, what the values are for what they do. And so that was pretty much ready before the class started, but we had to change, we worked all together. So this is a good team effort with the teaching assistants. And then the other thing, so there are numerous different kinds of multimodal and digital assignments that instructors and faculty can use, so I just listed a few of those. It could be video, audio input on discussion boards at campus, for instance, image submissions, Google Earth I've used in other classes. I know Aklilu has used that. In the South American Archaeology, I have the students fly us down to a South American archaeological site, and then, with Google Earth, and it's more of a three-dimensional experience. Mapping, we did infographics here, we'll talk about it in a minute. It could be podcasts or Canva we used to do the infographics. The students really, I don't think, had too much trouble with the actual assignment. But I think the hard part was the group projects. So this was also a group project with out of 265 students, trying to get them to work in groups. And the reason why I thought that was important, again, with the readings through SELT, was that, I just put down two here, was that teamwork, group work and collaborations are considered essential for 97.5% of hiring companies' preferred competencies. Maybe that could have been written a better way, but that means that out of all the companies that they interviewed in this article, 97.5% listed out really as I think that top skill that they would like to see college students have when they graduate. And then Google is well known for its team-based work. For computer sciences, they'll work in teams, and then that team adds to the larger project, whatever they're doing. So they also, in an article in the New York Times magazine, what Google learned from its quest to build the perfect team was that teamwork projects and study groups, at the university or college level, are a way for students to practice working in teams and a reflection of the increasing demand for employees who can adroitly navigate group dynamics. So the ability to work with other people is obviously very important. And so this was a group project also. So I'll let Stephen talk about the project. Gary will go over some of the statistics. So Self then came in and assessed the assignment with the students and got their feedback. Gary will cover that part, and Aklilu will talk about the sort of the reevaluation when the class is taught again and how to make it better. Okay, now go ahead.
All right. As Dr. Bonzani said, we selected a gender term infographic, largely because it was something we could all agree on and there was no controversy surrounding this particular topic, right? Definitely not. Students selected from a variety of possible terms and templates on Canva to visually create their project. Our objectives were to have students work in groups to build their project or infographic which would identify a term, to feature the term and its definition that is related to gender identities. Then they compiled statistical information, quantitative data, which was also featured on the infographic based on the term's usage in media in different levels, at the world level, national level, and state level, both local and in universities, and to share and comment on each other's presentations. Our goals were to raise awareness and understanding of real-world social relations, and for the students to engage with each other about the differences that they bring in terms of their perspectives and their points of view on these terms. It was very active. Students were all individually proactive in the design of their project, the selection of their term, and how they were going to present the information to each other and to the class. It was inclusive in that the students brought, and we encouraged them to bring their own perspectives individually to the project. We encouraged them to, because we sort of forced them together. We didn't allow them to sort of choose their own groups. We brought them together and put them together in the hopes that they would bring different perspectives and be able to engage with each other for the purpose of creating understanding, not agreement. Right? It was student-centered in that students were identifying their own interests, the term that they wanted to look at, and the interests that they had in to teach each other and the class about that terminology. And our strategy overall was to use a variety of digital pedagogies to work this project out, including Canva, which is a way to create infographics with a number of templates, Google Docs for sharing and discussing outside the classroom, and Canvas for the purposes of learning and sharing. In all of these places, in all of these spaces, the students were able to work on the project, to discuss the project, and share what they had in mind. So, they worked in groups of 4 or 5. They selected one term from a long list of gender identity terms in this LGBTQ glossary of terms that we provided. There were many, many, many of them. Probably 150 or so terms, I would say, a long list to choose from. They would then find a definition, they would agree on a definition for the term that they chose, and find statistics on the usage of that particular term in this Access World News. You can see the link here. It's through the UK library, where they can go and look at different publications, newspapers in particular, the way that that term is being used. Now, we encourage them, as part of the assignment, to find patterns of the usage of the term. Some students chose a term and then looked at certain states where that term was being used, and we learned that in those media presentations that there were legislation being written about that particular interest, right? So they were finding at least two patterns for how that word is being used in that media, in that place. And in some cases, they contrasted, for example, that same term being used in one state versus another state, and maybe hypothesized as to why that would be. So it was a very, very interesting opportunity to look at how the terms were being used, where they were being used, and why they were being used in those contexts. Right? So they used the findings from Access World News to then build graphs and charts to display quantitative information and to feature those on the infographics. It was really interesting the things that they chose. Some of them were pie charts, some of them were bar charts and graphs. It was all up to the way that, based on the information that they were getting, how they wanted to present it in a way that we understand them. And there were some conversations about what might be best, but I think that the way it turned out, the presentations that were generated, were excellent. Sort of the mechanics of the assignment here. They design the infographic. Once their research and data analysis are complete on the term, they then work in their group together in class time, and sometimes out of class, to design the infographic to visually display the data that they're getting. So Canva has a variety of templates, but all of them are customizable. They can change colors, they can subtract things, they can add things, depending on how they wanted to feature the information. We didn't give them a whole lot of instruction because we wanted them to create what they wanted to create. How they envisioned the project looking is what we wanted them to do. We didn't give them an example. We showed them one central example of the kind of information that they needed to contain on their infographics because they were graded on that. The criteria of what was on those slides as part of their grading. But we let them be very free and flexible with how they chose to display their information. Canva was used to complete the infographic, and then they were able to download the image as a JPEG. There is a free Canva account, and there is a membership that you can pay. So you have a lot more tools available if you're a paid member than you do for free. And in this case, the free version allowed you to download a JPEG image of the infographic and save it to the computer. There was a watermark on it and it was free, but it was absolutely fine. Okay? The free version is all we need. It didn't cost the student anything or the university anything. Once they were signed up and logged into Canva, they were able to also work together by sending each other emails and link up together and work in the same image in the Canva servers. And the image in Canva was able to generate a URL, a link that could then be shared in Canvas. Okay? So they finally arranged the information, all the terms and definition, patterns and graphics, in the template. Then they uploaded their completed assignment into Canvas in two places. In the discussion section and in the assignment. Only one student in the group was tasked with uploading the image itself and the URL. So we didn't have to have hundreds, 300 of these infographics uploaded. Only one per group, and we had them in groups of around 5 or so. Sometimes it was a little bit more if the section was larger. Right? That was a great way to go. Then, so the one group member would upload it both in the discussion section and the assignment section. And then the students were tasked with reviewing the work of all their classmates and making a respectful comment to provide feedback on each of them. This is the grading rubric that we used for the assignment. There were 5 total points available for the assignment. In one case, they were to list and define the gender term for 1 point. The second was statistics related to the term would be included. At least 2 patterns would be identified within the infographic. Then the 2 places where they were uploaded into Canvas. 1, the image itself, the JPEG, and 2 was the URL. Okay?
One thing I think is important to remember as you look at this assignment is that at no time did the instructors attempt to influence group dynamics. The only influence on group dynamics was when the groups were selected, regardless of how that was done. So once they were selected, it was up to that group to follow the instructions and to determine within the group who would be responsible for individual parts of the assignment. Now that's important to understand when we start to reach toward the end and we see where this actually goes. So the fun part is actually seeing where we go with the infographics. And I think I'm correct in saying that the infographics that we got back from the students was much more than in many cases we anticipated we would get back. In other words, the creativity that the students exhibited was far beyond what we anticipated for this assignment. For instance, if we look at this one, they have looked across a number of different continents, countries, and so forth, areas of the world to get their data. They have done an excellent job portraying the data. And they've really gone a bit beyond what we could expect for just a basic 3 points that you would get for this. So again, a good, and I'll have to say, this is one of the more plain ones that we saw. Some of them went well beyond this. We get some that are a little bit more complex in terms of how they displayed the data and where they got the data. In this case, we look at the Herald Leader and Kentucky Current as two sources close to home that we can see data coming from. But they also looked across the world in terms of how often they see that particular data. And so this fed into the patterns of the data in terms of how they analyzed it and what they got out of the actual assignment. Some of the assignments are a little bit difficult to understand. And again, this is what we've actually expected to see in some cases. Again, because we weren't trying to influence the group dynamics in terms of how they did things. And so we get this one, which both in terms of the colors used and the information depicted is a little bit difficult to understand. But
That's one of my favorites, though.
But again, this is what we expected. And this plays into the individual group dynamics of how the individuals themselves determined that the information needed to be displayed. The statistics for the class were kind of interesting. Now again, let's go back and look at group dynamics. We had a total of 66 groups comprised of anywhere from 2 to 5 students with trying to get 5. Now, how did we get down to 2? Well, in some cases, after we chose the students and informed them which group they were in, they never showed up. They just decided, I don't want to play in that group. Some of them came back and said, I want to go ahead and do it on my own. Some didn't turn in anything. And so it became very difficult for some of the groups to actually function in terms of producing these individual infographics. And I think they should be applauded for the number of submissions that they had as groups, even for the ones that were down to 2 people. 79 individual submissions, or 30%, and 18 or 7% no submissions whatsoever. And we see here with the 18 no submissions, 12 of them received either a D or a failing grade for the assignment. Now again, this assignment, as with many 100-level courses, was designed so that failing one assignment is not a failure for the entire course. So they could actually have said, I don't want to do this, blow it off, and still pass the course. In this case, I think we had students that decided not to, or more exceptional students. Canada, for some reason, could not account for 8 of the individuals, or a total of 3%. And we're not sure yet why Canada cannot account for them. But again, this was a total of 265 students that accomplished the task, or at least were there for the task, with a significant number of them actually completing it, and completing it very well. Now, after this assignment was completed and turned in, we asked CEL to come in and do an assessment of the project. And to be quite honest, in discussions that we had amongst ourselves, we wondered if perhaps this assignment was appropriate in terms of what we were asking the students and what we expected to get back. When we looked at the responses that CEL got, which total of 68 responses, overwhelmingly they understood how the categories were utilized, what they were, and how they were fixed, and important within the idea of social life. The majority of them agreed that they needed to understand how to utilize these individual terms. And again, we gave them a list of over 150. They chose what they wanted to look at. But they agreed in general, yeah, this is something that we need to understand, we need to know what they are. We need to be able to recognize the idea of racism, or the idea of ethnocentrism, or stereotyping. So that was important with regard to bolstering our view of why this is an important assignment. Everybody that responded was able to look at these. So there wasn't a problem, as we thought there may be, in everybody getting to see the assignments when they were posted. Everybody was pretty much able to upload it into the discussion section of Canvas. Canvas. And then the important one, should it remain as a group assignment? Overwhelmingly, they said, yes, this is a good group assignment. And I think in my own perspective, this is important as a group assignment because we are coming out of COVID, where the majority of students in this class have never worked in a group. This is the first time that most of them have worked in a group since probably they were freshmen in high school. So I think an important additive to the coursework that we see, especially at the 100 level when they're just entering their life in the UK.
Besides what Gary has said, most of the students who participated in these assignments came from a background where they didn't have an opportunity to work in groups. There are other things to consider as well. The COVID incidents, which happened in the past 2 years, have turned changes the dynamics of learning and teaching in classrooms tremendously, making our dependence on technology more important than any time else before. So, 60% of students have been completed works, and 30% of them choosing to work independently or at individual basis, also tells us that there is a room for learning to learn how to deal with situations like this, particularly in handling reports and assignments with technology and digital learning. So we identify that there is this uncertainty of leadership, uncertainty of the union of learner, and managing failure to participate, particularly in terms of attendance scale, as important points that we take into consideration in just learning skills. To consider the pitfalls are actually included in the length of time, and the spacing of the assignment is in the ways that we assign for each assignment. And this makes the practice and the assignment very, very important. I think the slides are somehow. Yeah. So the pitfalls, as we can see, this assignment required us to check in terms of attendance policy. As he mentioned earlier, there was a requirement for students to come into class in order to be assessed. outside of the groups, and therefore not showing up into class, which means that they're not going to be assigned in groups, that they have to end up to do the assignments on their own. And the second important point is the timing of due dates. The due dates are important because they determine how students are being accommodated in terms of their learning abilities. In other words, it's a question of equity on how we make this assignment level for all the students when they just learn. Due dates usually matters for students because we have to approach students in terms of, on the basis of their ability and the comfort of finishing their work on time or within a specific time. So what we want coming up in this case is that we just have to spread out assignments more evenly throughout the semester instead of assigning assignments randomly. So it requires a very strict plan, a very strict thought in order to make that assignment due dates are reasonable. The third important point is simplifying the assignments instructions and the steps, because we are dealing with digital learning and digital assignments, so instructions to be comprehensible for all the students in order to do anything of those assignments. So then what is becoming here is that, as we were talking earlier, this assignments have to be uploaded in different platforms, and the platforms are two, and therefore these locations have to be well explained, and the instructions need to be clear for the students in order to answer this assignments. So those things which I just have mentioned earlier, just to summarize up, there are always uncertainties in leadership and in terms of division of labor, which we have to sit together always in order to discuss on how to manage those activities and on how to let students know to allocate their time in order to participate in a collaborative learning, just ensuring division of labor among themselves as well. So there are, as we have said, 30% of the students who prefer to do it on themselves, by themselves, and avoid group participation. Others also just complete the assignment. This requires, again, another learning process in order to come up with a good strategy to deal with these issues. These are more or less what we just have to say about the digital learning that we just have said. I think we're listening to
Thank you, Jill Abney and Izzy Labor for helping with the development of the assignment through CELS. And also thank you to the teaching assistants, Gary, Stephen's weekly sayings, we have to work through the kinks in the matrix. We're working, okay, how do we get through this technical thing almost every week. So, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. So thank you. Okay, questions? Yeah, please. Okay. Aaron?
Dr. Aaron.
Aaron?
This actually refers to something that I saw on the gender dysphoria slide. Could someone just scroll back to that one? There was a place on the slide where it mentioned the word countries, but it actually referred to continents and regions of the world. And this is something that a lot of us encounter, I think, in teaching many classes. So yeah, that middle one, gender dysphoria right there. Yeah. So yeah, that, thank you. Yeah, country and number of articles that Pitfalls right? North America, Asia, Europe, South America.
Yeah,
countries, right?
Got that one for granted.
So I just wondered if in any feedback or conversations with students, if this seems like a learning opportunity related to 160, and I just wondered if that was something you all discussed? How did you decide what was Europe, for example?
Well,
Yes.
I think their mistake was they listed them as countries, but through that website, the Access News website, this is how they listed the information that they found.
Okay, so they copied that from a different
Yeah,
source.
they would have copied that directly from.
Just wondering if there were any conversations in class about that. It's fine if there, I'm just curious, like.
There were.
Yeah.
The students, in terms of the display of the information, were limited to how it was categorized by Access News. But we discussed, when we were looking at the locations, why it might occur that way. We did discuss on certain occasions why they were delineated in that way by Access News. But the most interesting information came from why it was addressed that way. You know, the cultures of those countries and those geographic regions, for example, why they were featured that way. And that provided some really interesting discussion in the classrooms.
Yeah, some of the things we found out was that a lot of the students are good geographically in terms of understanding, okay, France and Germany, that's in Europe. Where they become fuzzy is when they start looking at the fringes of what is Europe or what is Asia.
Right.
There they start to become very, very iffy about, you know, is this in Asia or is it not?
Yeah, the region is where I've done a lot of research is called Eurasia, so
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, don't even put that in because it'll blow them out.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the pragmatics? Like, at the end, Aklilu mentioned, like, the time frame for assignments, but I'm just curious what the time frame from introducing this technique and the topic and the learning process along the way to the final product, because it involves research, it involves learning a new app, unless they know these things, which
Well,
I'm
let me
thrilled to
comment.
see this, because I haven't heard about it. Thank you.
Let me comment on the app real quick. One of the things in the 3 sections that I had was that the overwhelming majority of students had used Canva.
Okay.
So they already knew that app.
Okay,
I would
so let me
assume-
finish my question though. So in terms of the pragmatics, were you doing some of this in lecture and in sections, I assume? But like, what was the balance from start to finish and time devoted in class?
We had a packet that we were given. It was rather lengthy. And one of the things that we were concerned about, we were uncertain with how would we be introducing it, how would we organize both the lectures and the recitation courses to move through each bit of the mechanics of it from start to finish. So we had a meeting with Dr. Jill Abbey for himself, and we were workshopping this. We had questions, you know, what complications would we face and how would we overcome them? And at the end of that particular meeting, which was very productive, we sort of felt comforted in the fact that the risks or the challenges, I might say, far outweighed, the benefits far outweighed the challenges. And it worked fairly well because we used an entire recitation section to introduce topic and then go over the Canva, how to upload it into Canvas, and then each of us, the TAs, would go and filter in and out of different groups, answer questions if they had, and then working after classes. We were getting emails on the subject if they had any questions. We were spending a lot of time in the class session workshopping the project as it went. So it didn't have as many complications as maybe we were concerned with when we just looked back. It turned out much more smoothly than we thought.
And was it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
I'd say 4.
Yeah, we started, was it right after the midterm?
Yeah.
Yeah, we introduced the idea of this right after the midterm.
Okay.
And then it was, I think, 2 weeks before the end of class.
Right.
It was due in.
I'd say 4 weeks. We're solid.
And were there any staged assignments along the way, or was here's the project and then here's the final product?
I wouldn't say they were scaffolded in that way,
Okay.
but we were able to see, because of our constant interaction with the students having a dedicated recitation time, the whole recitation, we were able to see where they were with it. So in that sense, if I had to do it over again, we might design it in such a way where we were scaffolding those and
Yeah,
submitting them.
research done.
But I don't think that's what we did.
Okay, thank you.
One.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So let me say that first, and then I just have a couple of questions. So you said that they had to find 2 patterns. Did they have to do a write-up of that? And the second question related to that was there any incorporation of this into the lecture that did an analysis of the overall patterns?
There wasn't a write-up per se, but we did get on the discussion board, there were some discussions that I saw regarding comments on the patterns that we see. We didn't require them to do like an auxiliary paper to go with it to explain this. What we really wanted was for everything to be shown here and stand alone.
You see how it's featured here in just these little short blurbs?
Yeah, the
See,
sound, just,
it doesn't fit a lot of text on the infographic, but it was a part of the conversations we were having in recitation. Yeah, they didn't write about it per se, but we were discussing it in recitation in some depth.
there was, again, this was just short, this was just one part of that bigger ANT 160 class. So there was actually only one lecture on gender. And then the rest was really basically in recitations and then on their work on their own. And one of the other things in SEL, they said sometimes with some of these, keep them low stakes. So I guess, if, really a student really has trouble with the assignment, they wouldn't fail because they couldn't do this assignment. So it was sort of keeping lower stakes and was, again, really only one lecture, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in recitation.
This has more to do with personality, group dynamics, I think. But first of all, the project's really cool. I don't know if I get to figure out how to do it. Very interesting. The problem I've always had with group projects is that almost every group I've ever been in, the amount contributed by the members is quite great.
Yeah.
Some are going to be really concerned about their grade, and others rather go party on, So how do you feel? They're going to get the same grade in the end, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. What happened in a lot of the groups is the group member would come back and say, hey, I know that we've got this person in the group, but we don't know who they are, they've never shown up. And our answer to that was, well, when you turn in your project, all your names are going to be on there except that person's. And we announced many times during recitation, if you're not doing the work, you're not showing up, your name's not going to be on your group's assignment when it is turned in. Now, for some people, that spurred them to come up and say, hey, I'd rather do this on my own. For others, the 18, they decided not to do it at all.
Dr. Bonzani anchored our announcements in the main lecture, which I think, added more credibility to it. People were either more participative or they changed their groups. And a couple of occasions they came up and said, hey, I want to work with these couple of people. And we're like, fine. Just give them a lot of autonomy to cultivate something that would work better for them. Because you're absolutely right. The participation levels were very low.
Yeah, and we purposely tried to stay out of what was going on within the groups to let them manage themselves as part of the learning experience.
I insist they had to have their names listed on the project. And I think it worked out, except I think there were 2 instances, not a real small percentage of people that said they had participated in a group, like 1. And I said, well, let's contact the group. So we contacted the group. I can't remember now. I think there were 2 instances. One, the group said, oh yeah, they did participate. And in one instance, they said, no, they didn't participate.
I just want to say that this is a really brave assignment to develop at a time when anti-LGBT rhetoric is increasing and violent and vitriolic, and students in the UK engage in that stuff. And I just wondered if you were afraid of that when you began the assignment, or if you had any indication that there were students in groups that were white nationalists, LGBTQ, if you were worried about that, some indications of it.
I was excited about it. I confront those topics. It's one of the things I love the most about anthropology, in that it seeks understanding. It doesn't try to force agreement or homogeneity. We spoke as a group, we spoke with SELT in terms of how to present that. And the way I think I did it in my sections was to tell them, listen, you're bringing your own perspectives, your own identities into this conversation. All of those things are important because they describe who you are. These labels that you have, these words that we are using, are important. They're part of your identity. And it can hurt when those things collide and there's collision of those things. We did mention that it was a controversial topic. But the way I think we used it was to interrogate the topic in such a way that the students were focusing entirely on understanding, not agreement.
Can I comment
Yeah.
on that question? So
Please.
when this was born in Renee's brain, and we were talking it through when she was in TII, I had that in mind because in a large class like this, you want to make sure that you don't ask students to say things that you don't actually want them to hear say. And I think that's what's really great about the way Renee designed the assignment, because if you look at through what she's asking for, there isn't space for that. I mean, they can go rogue, but they're not answering the assignment. The assignment says, let's look at the data, pull the statistics, find the patterns. It doesn't say, tell me what you think about LGBTQ people. Now, you might have the ones that say, yay for our trans homies, but that's, that's not, that's the rarity, I think. And that one, in that case, seems supportive rather than, and you can intervene if you see that with the TAs every week, kind of walking with them. There's space to say, look, if you don't want to talk about a term, there's 164 other ones that you can pick. One of them's probably hegemonic masculinity.
Okay, we can take about one more question if we have anyone else.
I don't really have a question. Oh, did I just cut something off? Someone back there? I don't have a question. I wanted to say, like, I applaud you for doing that. I also run a group project in a large class, and, it's like, I just remember being part of different workshops on multimodal, but like, when you have a lot of students, a lot of the examples from being innovative about group projects came from classes of 30 or smaller. And so this is just, I think organizationally, it's actually challenging, and there's a lot of moving parts, and I just applaud you for, putting the energy and effort into creating something in a class of this size, because I feel for you. I know that, it's 3 times the number of students I've had to work with, and, there's the people that are invested, the people that move out, people that, that show up here but don't show up here, and so it's wonderful that you're,
Yeah, that's what talked to the Teaching Innovation Institute, because that was it took about a year, so it wasn't like overnight.
Yeah, but and then you fine tune it, I think, and then you fine tune it semester by semester, I think, too. You're doing, like,
Yeah, lots of
analyzing.
recommendations.
Yeah, the students also contributed a lot in shaping and fine-tuning.
Yeah, for the next semester.
Yeah, it was not just an assignment, but also a project that we just came by some sort of doing an effective group work.
It was a project for you guys.
Which is amazing. You should write it up.